According to the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, around the world there are an estimated 171 million orphans who are living in orphanages or on the streets and lack care and attention required for healthy development. Of this number, 463,000 of these children reside in the United States. Good evening. My name is Brianna Stradato. Today I'm here to tell you that adopting domestically rather than internationally is beneficial to an adopting parent. Couples who are adopting should consider domestic adoption over international adoption because they wouldn't deny the social right to the international children. They'll be provided with more accurate medical records and personal history on the adoptive child and their birth parents, and the time and money spent in the adoption process will be less. Although some may disagree and have full support for international adoption, I strongly believe that you should consider adopting domestically instead. Some people may overlook domestic adoption and seem to neglect the amount of orphans here in the United States. What we need to realize is that these children need us. Not only this, but there are positive repercussions of adopting domestically. What some may not realize is that adopting a child internationally will strip them of their social rights, unlike adopting a child here in the United States. In a domestic adoption, the child can be in an open or semi-open adoption in which the child is able to remain in some contact with their parents. This also allows the child to know where they come from and what their parents were like. This contact allows for questions the child may have had about why they were given up for adoption to be answered. This knowledge is comforting and reassuring to the child. On the other hand, children who are adopted internationally are stripped from their culture and everything that they have known or will know as they age. As stated by an article on international adoption, children's rights to knowledge and access to their birth family may be placed at risk, and children's identification with their racial, ethnic, or national group may be interrupted. Not knowing these qualities can potentially hinder the child's emotional stability in the future. Aside from the social rights of the children, the child's medical history is something that is very important to consider when adopting. There is a great difference between domestic and international adoptions in regards to the children's medical records. Domestic adoption agencies will provide the couples with the medical records of the child and the social history of the birth parent pertaining to the child. Some agencies make this information available to the family prior to match and allow them to accept or deny the match based on those factors, as reported by America's Adoption Agency. This is important because the adopting family will be aware if the child has any disabilities or illnesses and can be prepared to handle that situation or deny the match if they don't believe they are set to raise a child under these circumstances. Because of this, the children are placed in a home in which is truly the best match for them, and the adopting parents are placed with the child that best matches them as well. International adoption agencies don't typically have access to as much medical and social history as we do here in the United States. Oftentimes, the children will have certain health issues, and the adopting couple will be unaware until after they've adopted them. This calls for extra expenses for medical bills, and in some cases, more demanding child care than they had planned on. As reported by America's Adoption Agency, medical records of children adopted internationally are often minimal, if any at all. Information regarding the social history of the child's birth parents, such as family medical history, or any possible exposure to drugs or alcohol while the child is in the womb is also often unavailable, and the effects of such exposure are often unrecognized until after the child is placed with the family. This could be potentially problematic for an adoptive couple and their family because there will be so much uncertainty about the child that they are taking in. Besides the uncertainty of medical records, the cost and time of the adoption are also two main aspects. According to America's Adoption Agency, many mistakenly believe that international adoption costs far less than domestic adoption. However, this is not true. Although the adoption fees of both domestic and international adoptions are oftentimes very similar, the extra costs of completing the adoption internationally are far more expensive. As far as these extra costs are concerned, there are a lot more steps that are taken in an international adoption and have costs that come along with them. For example, you're required to get your visa and you're required to make several trips to the country you're adopting the child from for time periods of a few days to several weeks, each trip. These trips can be extremely pricey. Also, with the uncertainty of the medical records of your child you're receiving, there may be future expenses for health issues. However, in a domestic adoption, the extra expenses of travel will be far less expensive because you wouldn't be traveling as far as you would for an international adoption. When there are so many children here in the United States that need loving, supportive homes, it makes sense for adopting couples to spare the extra cost and provide a loving home for one of these children. Aside from the cost, the time of the adoption process varies as well. Domestic adoptions are typically quicker than international, lasting about 2 years. Another benefit of domestic adoption that allows for a quicker adoption process is that it offers the opportunity to participate in a newborn or young infant adoption, something you wouldn't be able to do in another country. Because you would be receiving the child at such a young age or at birth, the process of domestic adoption is shortened. International adoption agencies seem to be making adoption harder and harder as time goes by. Adopting internationally can take up to 4 or 5 years depending upon the country. It is becoming more and more of a hassle for people in the United States to adopt a child from other countries, yet another reason why domestic adoption is the better option. There are a lot of requirements today in order for people to adopt children internationally. This makes the wait time for the child longer because they are required to be checked for all criteria, among other steps they must take in order to adopt. For example, the Bureau of Consular Affairs in the U.S. Department of State declares that when adopting a child from China, both parents must be between the ages of 30 and 50. Those couples who apply to adopt a special needs child must be between the ages of 30 and 55. Couples must be married, defined as one man and one woman. They must have been married at least 2 years, and if either person has previously divorced, the couple must have been married at least 5 years. No more than 2 divorces are allowed. They both must be high school graduates and have at least $10,000 annual income for each family member in the household, including the child they are going to be adopting. They both must be physically and mentally fit, with other certain stipulations. These are merely a few of China's requirements for adoption, thus proving the difficulty a couple must go through in order to successfully adopt a child from China. Other countries also have similar requirements that make adoption process very time-consuming. In conclusion, I ask that those of you who are going to adopt a child would consider domestic adoption. It is truly the better option, and you'll benefit from it in more ways than one. It is important for us to take charge and adopt domestically so that next year the number of orphans in the United States decreases. What I want you to leave here with today is the knowledge that these orphans in the United States are in need of our support through adoption, and you have the power to be the support that they need. Thank you for your time.